So when you think of Royal Caribbean, what comes to mind? The biggest cruise ships in the world, water slides, surf simulators, rock climbing walls, maybe perfect day at CocoCay. But Royal Caribbean has become much more than simply a cruise line with really big ships. Tonight, we're going to take a look at Royal Caribbean, where they came from, the different classes of ships in their fleet, what the Royal Caribbean experience is really like, who I think they are best suited for, and some of the huge things Royal Caribbean has coming up next over the next several years. And trust me, there's a lot coming. So welcome aboard Cruise Compass Live. I am Joe with Premium Travel Group, and every week we take a deeper look at cruising, cruise lines, destinations, and the things that can help you choose the vacation that's right for you. Over the past few weeks, we've been working our way through some of the major cruise lines. We've talked about Norwegian Cruise Line, we talked about MSC Cruises, and last week we talked about Carnival Cruise Line. Tonight, we're continuing the series with one of the biggest names in cruising, Royal Caribbean International. If you're joining us live, say hello in the comments and let me know. Have you ever sailed Royal Caribbean? And if you have, what was your favorite ship or experience? And if you've never sailed Royal, tell me what has kept you from trying them. So let's get started. Royal Caribbean is one of those cruise lines that has become almost synonymous with the modern megaship. For decades, Royal has built its reputation around one basic idea. How can we put on a cruise ship, or how much can we put on a cruise ship that people never expected to find at sea? And they've repeatedly pushed that boundary. From rock climbing walls, ice skating rinks, surf simulators, neighborhoods, Central Park with real plants, massive entertainment venues, and water parks. And eventually, entire ships that feel almost like floating resorts or theme parks. But here's something important. Royal Caribbean isn't just about giant ships. Their fleet spans several generations and several very different styles of cruising. And that's why understanding the ship class is incredibly important when you're considering Royal Caribbean. Royal Caribbean's story goes back to the late 1960s. The company began with ships that would look tiny compared with what Royal operates today. But innovation became part of Royal Caribbean's identity very early. Over the years, they introduced ships that were dramatically larger than what came before them. Then came features that sounded almost impossible on a cruise ship. The Royal Promenade, ice skating, rock climbing, surfing, Central Park, the Aqua Theater. And now we're in the Icon era. But Royal Caribbean isn't simply designing ships. They're essentially designing floating vacation destinations. The evolution is really the Royal Caribbean story. Build something people haven't seen before, and then figure out how to go bigger. Now, I'm not going to sit here tonight and read the name of every Royal Caribbean ship. That would take forever. And that doesn't really help you decide which cruise is right for you. Instead, let's take a look at the classes of ships, because that's where you'll really see how different one Royal Caribbean vacation can be from another. First, we'll start with the Vision class. These are among Royal Caribbean's smaller and more traditional ships. You're not going to find the giant neighborhoods and massive water parks of the newer ship, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. These ships can offer a more traditional cruise experience and can reach ports that some of the megaships simply cannot. They're a reminder that Royal Caribbean isn't exclusively about enormous ships. Moving on to the Radiance class ships, they are known for something I really like: lots of glass and ocean views. The design connects passengers with ocean rather than making the ship itself the entire destination. These ships can be particularly appealing on the destination, focused itineraries such as Alaska. If you're someone who says, I want to remember I'm actually on a ship, Radiance class, excuse me, my voice. Radiance class may be worth a look. Then you've got Voyager class. This is where you really start seeing the Royal Caribbean we recognize today. Voyager class introduced the Royal Promenade concept and helped change people's expectations of what could exist inside of the cruise ships. These ships brought more entertainment, activities, and onboard attractions into the cruise experience. And even years later, Voyager-class ships can still offer a very good balance between ship size, activities, and value. Then we take a look at Freedom Class. Freedom Class took the Voyager concept and made it bigger. These ships helped introduce another Royal Caribbean signature, the Flow Rider, a surf simulator. For families and travelers who want plenty to do without necessarily stepping all the way up to the Oasis or Icon class, Freedom Class can be a really interesting middle ground for you. Then we've got the Quantum and the Quantum Ultra class. This started taking technologies and activities even further. The Quantum class introduced experiences like the North Star observation capsule, Ripcord by iFly skydiving simulator, 270 entertainment venue, and the Seaplex, a huge indoor activity place where you might find everything from sports to bumper cars. These ships are especially interesting because they're designed to work well in different climates. Then we get to the Oasis class. This is where Royal Caribbean changed the cruise industry again. When the Oasis of the Seas arrived, the scale was unlike anything cruising had really ever seen before. Royal introduced the idea of dividing the ship into neighborhoods. Instead of feeling like one enormous cruise ship, different sections of the ship had completely different personalities. You've got areas such as Central Park, the Boardwalk, the Royal Promenade, pool and sports areas, entertainment districts, and the Aqua Theater. These ships are so large that one of the biggest complaints I hear about them is also one of their biggest selling points. There's just too much to do. You could spend an entire week on board and still not experience everything. For some travelers, that's fantastic. For others, it can feel overwhelming. And that's why matching the right cruise line and the right ship to the traveler matters so much. Now we come to the current Icon class. And this is, Royal Caribbean's newest generation. The Icon of the Seas changed the conversation again when she debuted. Royal Caribbean combined elements of a cruise ship, a resort, a water park, and an entertainment destination into one enormous vacation experience. The ships are organized into 8 neighborhoods and are heavily focused on families and multi-generation travel. You'll find areas such as the Surfside, designed specifically around young families, Central Park, the Aquadome, Thrill Island, Chill Island, the Royal Promenade, and some of the most elaborate family accommodations ever built on a cruise ship. Icon was followed by the Star of the Seas, and now in 2026, the Legend of the Seas. The Legend of the Seas is Royal Caribbean's, newest addition to that Icon family. She's just beginning to sail. She's sailing Europe right now before she's going to move to Fort Lauderdale later this year. And Royal isn't simply copying the Icon. Legend brings some new experiences of their own, including new dining and entertainment concepts while retaining the major features that made the Icon class so successful. Royal Caribbean says Legend will feature 28 dining options, 7 pools, 10 whirlpools, and the familiar 8 neighborhood Icon class design. After Legend, things get even more interesting. The 4th Icon class ship has now been revealed, the Hero of the Seas. The Hero is scheduled to arrive in Miami in August of 2027, and Royal Caribbean is pushing the family vacation concept even further. Hero is expecting to feature 9 pools, the most at sea, 28 dining venues, new family raft sides, cooking classes, and new accommodations designed for multi-generational families. One of those accommodations is called the Ultimate Family Treehouse. And yes, it's 3 stories high. Think about how far we come. We went from talking about cruise cabins to talking about 3-story family accommodations on a cruise ship. But Hero isn't the end of the story. Another Icon is already coming. Royal Caribbean has already started construction on a 5th Icon-class ship, scheduled to debut in 2028. As of right now, Royal has not announced the ship's name, so the Icon story continues. But then Royal Caribbean does something very Royal Caribbean. Instead of stopping there, they start another class, the Discovery class, which is coming in 2029. Royal Caribbean has officially announced a completely new generation of ships called the Discovery class. The first Discovery class ship is, like we said, scheduled for 29, followed by a second ship in 2032. Royal Caribbean has also secured options for as many as 4 additional ships. We don't know everything about Discovery class yet, but here's why I'm watching this very closely. Royal Caribbean has spent years building bigger and bigger ships. Discovery class could represent another evolution in how Royal approaches destinations and ship design. Royal says these ships are being created to bring the world closer to their guests. So over the next few years, this is definitely a class we're going to be watching. So where does Royal Caribbean sail from? Well, pretty much it's world round. Okay, you'll find itineraries throughout the Caribbean and the Bahamas, Alaska, Europe and the Mediterranean, Mexico, Asia, Australia and the South Pacific, and other nations around the globe. But increasingly, Royal Caribbean isn't only thinking about the ship, they're building an entire destination strategy. And that brings us to something Royal Caribbean has become very well known. And that would be Perfect Day at CocoCay. It in the Bahamas has become a huge part of Royal Caribbean's Royal Caribbean's vacation experience. And there's a reason Royal Caribbean used the words thrill and chill. You could spend your day relaxing on the beach, or you could spend it racing down water slides. There's thrill water park pools, beaches, cabanas, hideaway beach for adults, and plenty of different ways to build the type of island day you want. But CocoCay was really just beginning. Royal Caribbean is building destinations, throughout the Caribbean. This is one of the biggest stories happening right now. The company expanding beyond ships with what it calls ultimate destination. You've got the Royal Beach Club Paradise Island in Nassau. That just recently opened. Beautiful spot. Royal Beach Club in Cozumel. They're still working on approvals for that, so we don't know when that will be open. We've got the Royal Beach Club Lanapa, which is planned for Vanuatu in the South Pacific. And Royal is developing Perfect Day Mexico, planned for Manuel. So think about strategy here. Royal Caribbean isn't simply asking, how do we build a better ship? They're asking, how do we control more of the entire vacation ship? The ship becomes a destination. Then the destinations themselves become extensions of Royal Caribbean's experience. That's a major shift in cruising. Royal Caribbean's dining experience depends on what ship you're sailing. You have traditional, including the main dining room and buffet options, but Royal Caribbean has also built a very large specialty dining portfolio. Depending on the ship, you may encounter everything from steakhouses, Italian restaurants, sushi, seafood, and highly immersive dining experience. On the newest Icon class ships, they're taking that concept even further. For me, this is an area worth researching the specific ship. 2 people can tell you they've sailed Royal Caribbean and have very different dining experiences depending on the ship they sailed. Now, when it comes to entertainment, this is where Royal Caribbean is actually very, very strong. Depending on the ship, you might find not just Broadway-style productions, but ice skating shows, aqua theater performances, live music, comedy, high-tech productions, and just absolutely massive entertainment venues. Royal has invested heavily in entertainment that feels much closer to what you would expect at a major resort or entertainment destination. On the larger ships, entertainment isn't something you simply do after dinner. It could be one of the major reasons you choose the ship. When it comes to activities, we've gone over a bunch of these, but depending on the ship, you're going to have rock climbing, surfing, skydiving simulators, zip lines, ice skating, bumper cars, mini golf, water slides, massive water parks, sports courts, I'm running out of breath, kids programs, pools, adult spaces, and so much more. And just take notice. How many times I've said depending on the ship. That's intentional, because never assume every Royal Caribbean ship offers the same experiences, because they just don't. Who is Royal Caribbean best for? Well, that's kind of a big question to ask. Who do I think Royal Caribbean is best for? Well, families. That's an obvious one. We've kind of gone over all that. Royal Caribbean has certainly made families their major focus, particularly on the Oasis and the Icon class. And that brings us to multi-generational families. Grandparents, parents, kids, teenagers. There are activities for several generations on board, which can make Royal a very strong multi-generational option. Active travelers. If you're a person who wants to do things on vacation, boy, Royal gives you a lot of choices. Those of you who love entertainment, the big shows and entertainment, Royal, again, you got to take a look at them. People who want that resort style vacation, especially on the Oasis and Icon class, the ship itself becomes a major part of the vacation. Royal Caribbean is also, a great introduction to cruising for those first-time cruisers. This is because, there are so many different experiences available. But then we come to who might Royal not be best for. If your ideal cruise is quiet, small, intimate, very destination-focused, or centered around traditional cruising rather than onboard attractions, Royal Caribbean's megaships may not be your best match. That doesn't necessarily mean Royal Caribbean itself is wrong for you. Remember, the Radiance class is very different from the Icon class. The question isn't simply, should I cruise Royal Caribbean? The better question is, which Royal Caribbean ship fits the vacation I actually want? And that's an important distinction. So my final take on this, Royal Caribbean has built its reputation by repeatedly asking what's next, and then building it. Examples have always been the Royal Promenade, that's where it all kind of started, rock climbing walls, ice skating arenas, surfing, neighborhoods, Central Park, aqua theaters, massive water parks, the Icon class, the biggest ships at sea right now, the private destinations, and now another generation of ships is already being developed. Royal Caribbean may not be the perfect cruise line for everyone. No cruise line ever is. But if you're looking for a vacation where the ship itself is a major part of the destination, Royal Caribbean absolutely belongs in the conversation. And with the Legend arriving now, Hero coming in 2027, another Icon ship in 2028, and Discovery class beginning in 2029, Royal Caribbean clearly isn't finished pushing the limits. So here's a quick question for everybody. Before we wrap things up tonight, I want to hear from you. If you could sail one Royal Caribbean class tomorrow, which would you choose? Would you go all the way up to the Icon class? Would you choose Oasis, Quantum? Or would you rather have one of the smaller Radiance or Vision class ships? Drop your answer in the comments. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I love those Voyager class ships. They were beautiful, smaller, but you have plenty to still do on them. So you have my answer on that one. In closing, I just want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Everyone, who is watching the replay, and everyone who continues to follow along as we work our way through the major cruise lines. Remember, there isn't one cruise line that's perfect for everybody. The goal is finding the cruise line, the ship, the itinerary that's perfect for you. So again, I am Joe with Premium Travel Group. Thank you for joining me on board Cruise Compass Live. Until next time, God bless and happy sailing.